The great hull of the Galactic Covenant floated in the empty space between three dying stars. It was old, older than most species could remember. The beings who built it had turned to dust long ago, but their test remained. Every species that wanted to join the Covenant had to pass the examination. This was the law. This was the way. For 1,000,000 years, no one had questioned it. Examiner Velkith walked through the observation chamber with slow, careful steps. Her body was tall and thin, covered in pale blue scales that caught the light from the viewing screens. Her eyes were compound, like an insect's, and they could see in many directions at once. She had watched 107 species take the examination. She had seen 93 of them die. The examination was simple. Take a small group from the candidate species. Drop them on an unknown world with nothing. No tools. No weapons. No food. No shelter. Let them survive for 40 cycles. If enough of them lived, the species could join the Covenant. Most did not live. Velkith stopped before the main screen. Her assistant, a younger Sithrani named Koth, stood waiting with a data tablet. The next candidates, Koth said. Species designation, human. Origin, soul system, third planet. They call it Earth. Velkith made a sound of mild interest. She had read the preliminary reports on humans. They were a young species, barely reaching into space. Their bodies were soft and weak. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor, no venom. Their eyes could only see in one direction. Their ears could only hear a small range of sounds. They lived for less than 100 years, which was almost nothing. Show me, Velkith said. The screen changed. It showed a blue and green world, covered in water and clouds. Cities glittered on the dark side. Ships moved in orbit. It was a busy world, full of activity. They have 7 billion individuals on their home planet, Koth reported. They have spread to their moon and 2 neighboring planets. They discovered faster than light travel only 30 years ago. Primitive, Velkith said. She had seen species that controlled entire galaxies. Humans were like children playing in the dirt. Shall I show you the selected candidates? Velkith nodded. The screen changed again. 12 faces appeared, arranged in 2 rows. 6 males, 6 females. They looked strange to Velkith's eyes, with their flat faces and small ears and hair growing from their heads. Their skin came in different shades of brown and pink. Their eyes came in different colors. Selected at random from their general population, Koth said, as required by examination rules. No military specialists. No survival experts. Just ordinary individuals. Velkith studied the faces. There was an old man with dark skin and white hair. A young woman with short black hair and nervous eyes. A large male with a scarred face and thick arms. A thin woman with gray hair pulled back tight. Ordinary faces. Frightened faces. What are their occupations? Velkith asked. Koth checked the tablet. A farmer. A doctor. A teacher. An engineer. A soldier, but retired. A scientist who studies rocks. A woman who builds machines. A man who writes stories. A woman who cooks food. A young man who studies plants. A woman who fixes broken things. And a man who leads a small community. No survival training? The soldier has some. The farmer has practical skills. The others are untrained. Velkith felt a small wave of disappointment. These humans would die quickly. There would be nothing interesting to observe. She had hoped for something different this time. Show me the examination world, she said. The screen changed to show a gray-green moon orbiting a gas giant. Forests covered most of the surface. Mountains rose in the distance. Rivers cut through the land like silver threads. Crucible 7, Koth said. Standard examination environment. Breathable atmosphere. Drinkable water. Edible plant life, if they can identify it. Local fauna includes several predator species. Temperature ranges from cold to moderate. 40 cycles of daylight and darkness. Predators? Nothing they cannot survive if they are careful. The largest is a 6-legged hunter we call the Gravemaker. It has killed candidates from 11 previous examinations. Velkith remembered those deaths. The Gravemaker was patient. It watched. It waited. Then it struck. Begin the transport, Velkith ordered. She watched as the 12 humans were taken from their world. They had been told what was happening. They had agreed to represent their species. But knowing and experiencing were different things. The transport beam caught them one by one. The old farmer looked up at the sky with calm eyes. The young scientist trembled. The retired soldier stood straight and still. The doctor held hands with the engineer beside her. The teacher closed his eyes and moved his lips in what might have been a prayer. Then they were gone. Velkith turned to watch the other screen, the one showing Crucible 7. 12 points of light appeared on the surface, scattered across a valley near a river. The humans had arrived. Begin observation, Velkith said. Record everything. She settled into her observation chair. Other examiners began entering the chamber, curious about the new candidates. Word spread quickly when a new species was being tested. How long do you think they will last? Koth asked. Velkith considered the question. The Velox had lasted 6 cycles before internal conflict destroyed them. The Krenavathi had lasted 12 before a predator attack scattered them beyond recovery. The Methylans had lasted 20 before disease took them. 8 cycles, Velkith said. Perhaps 10. They are social creatures. They will stay together at first. But they are weak. When food runs short, when the cold comes, when the predators circle, they will break. They always break. She watched the screen as the 12 points of light began to move. The humans were finding each other, drawn together by some instinct. They are gathering, Koth observed. Yes, the first response is always to gather. It gives them comfort. It will not save them. Velkith had seen this pattern many times. First came gathering. Then came hope. Then came fear. Then came despair. Then came death. She expected nothing different from the humans. In the valley below, on a world far from home, 12 frightened people stood in a circle and looked at each other. They did not know that alien eyes watched them from the darkness between stars. They did not know that they were expected to fail. They did not know that 93 species had died where they now stood. They only knew that they were alone, and that they had 40 days to survive. The examination had begun. The sun of Crucible 7 was setting when the 12 humans finished gathering. They stood in a rough circle near the river, looking at each other with uncertain eyes. Some were breathing hard from running. Others were shaking from fear. All of them were far from home. Marcus Jackson was the first to speak. He was the retired soldier, a man of 53 years with gray at his temples and scars on his hands. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth. He had seen death many times, but he had never felt so far from everything he knew. Is everyone here? He asked. Is anyone hurt? The others checked themselves. The young plant scientist, a boy named David, had cut his arm on a sharp rock during transport. The doctor, Sarah Okonkwo, was already moving toward him. She tore a strip from her shirt and wrapped his wound with quick, practiced hands. We need to stay calm, Marcus said. We need to think. Think about what? The voice belonged to Chen Wei, a young woman who fixed machines for a living. Her face was pale with fear. We have nothing. No food, no water, no shelter. We are going to die here. We are not going to die. The old farmer, Yusuf, spoke with a quiet voice. He was 73 years old, with white hair and skin darkened by decades of sun. I have been poor before. I have been hungry before. We have air to breathe. We have water in that river. We have our minds and our hands. That is enough. Up in the observation chamber, Examiner Velketh leaned forward in her chair. This was interesting. Most species fell into panic at this point. The Velox had started fighting within the first hour. But these humans were talking. Note this, she told Koth. They are establishing communication patterns. Back on the surface, the humans had begun to introduce themselves. It seemed strange, this ritual of names and occupations, when survival was uncertain. But Marcus understood something important. They were 12 strangers. If they wanted to live, they needed to become something else. I am Marcus Jackson. I was a soldier for 30 years. I know how to fight, how to build shelter, how to find direction. I will help however I can. I am Sarah Okonkwo. I am a doctor. I can treat wounds and illness. I know something about which plants might be safe and which might be poison. My name is Yusuf Hamid. I am a farmer from Morocco. I know how to grow things, how to read weather, how to find water. One by one, they shared. Maria Chen was an engineer who designed buildings. Thomas Wright was a teacher who taught young children. Elena Vasquez was a scientist who studied rocks and minerals. James Cooper was a writer who created stories. Priya Sharma cooked food in a restaurant. David Miller studied plants at a university. Lin Jiang fixed things that were broken. And Robert Wilson led a small town as its mayor. So we have a soldier, a doctor, a farmer, an engineer, a teacher, a geologist, a writer, a cook, a botanist, a mechanic, and a politician, Marcus said. Not bad. What do we do now? Priya asked. She was small and thin, with large dark eyes that looked up at the strange sky. We survived tonight, Marcus said. Tomorrow we start building something more permanent. But first, we need shelter and fire. Fire? Lynn looked around at the alien forest. From what? Wood burns on Earth. I am betting wood burns here too. Marcus pointed at the trees. Maria, you design buildings. What do you think about shelter? Maria Chun walked toward the tree line. Her mind was already working, measuring, planning. These trees have thick branches. If we can break some down, we can make a simple lean-to against that rock face over there. It will not be comfortable, but it will keep the wind off us. Good. James, David, come with me. We will gather wood. Elena, those rocks near the river, can any of them make sparks? Elena picked up a stone and examined it. Her eyes brightened. This looks like flint, or something similar. Yes, I can make sparks. Within an hour, the humans had divided into groups. Some gathered wood. Some collected stones. Some pulled long grasses for bedding. Yusuf walked along the river's edge, studying the plants that grew there. What are you doing? Sarah asked him. Looking, Yusuf said. Every plant tells a story. These ones have been eaten. He pointed at leaves with small bite marks. Something eats them. Maybe we can too. But we must be careful. We must test. Test how? Yusuf picked a small leaf. He crushed it between his fingers and brought it to his nose. First we smell. Does it smell like poison? Then we touch. He rubbed the crushed leaf on the inside of his arm. If my skin burns or swells, the plant is dangerous. If nothing happens after 1 hour, we try a tiny bit on the tongue. If nothing happens after another hour, we try eating a small piece. Then we wait again. Sarah watched with growing respect. You have done this before. In my village, when I was young, there was a famine. We had to learn what we could eat and what would kill us. Some died learning, but those of us who lived, we remembered. Velkith watched this exchange with growing interest. The Old One, she said to Koth. He's teaching survival methods from their home world. Primitive methods, Koth said. But effective? Note how Zaring knowledge. The soldier leads, but he asks the engineer about shelter. The farmer teaches the doctor about plants. They are building something. Building what? Velkith did not answer immediately. She watched as the humans worked together, calling out to each other, adjusting their plans when something did not work. The writer was bad at collecting wood, so they moved him to gathering grass instead. The mechanic had clever hands, so she helped the engineer construct the shelter frame. They are building a group, Velkith finally said. Not just individuals surviving alone, but a functioning group. Each person has a role based on their ability. By the time darkness fell on Crucible 7, the 12 humans had a shelter. It was rough and simple. Just branches leaned against rock, covered with leaves and grass. But it blocked the wind. Inside, Elena struck her flint against a piece of iron-rich stone that Lynn had found, and sparks flew. Dry grass caught the sparks. Small flames grew into a fire. The humans gathered around the warmth. They were hungry, but they were alive. They were frightened, but they were together. Priya had found a way to boil river water using a stone with a natural hollow, killing any sickness that might live in it. Yusuf reported that 2 plants had passed his first test and might be safe to eat. We made it through the first day, Robert said. He was the mayor, a man who was used to leading meetings, not survival situations. But his voice was steady. Tomorrow we do better. Tomorrow we start building something permanent, Maria said. Something that will last 40 days. Marcus looked around at the faces lit by firelight. 12 strangers from different parts of Earth. Different ages, different skills, different lives. But here, on this alien world, they were becoming something new. We need a watch schedule, he said. 4 shifts of 3 people each. We do not know what lives in those forests. We need eyes open at all times. No one argued. They divided the night between them and settled in to rest. In the observation chamber, Velkith sat back in her chair. Around her, other examiners whispered to each other. This was not what they had expected. 1 cycle complete, Koth said. All 12 candidates alive. They have fire, shelter, and water. They are testing local plants for food. Interesting, Velkith said softly. Very interesting. She had expected panic. She had expected despair. Instead, she had seen something else. Something she did not quite have a name for yet. The humans had taken chaos and turned it into order. They had taken fear and turned it into action. They had taken 12 strangers and turned them into a team. On the surface below, the fire burned through the night. 12 humans slept in shifts, keeping watch over each other, waiting for the dawn of a new day on a world far from home. The examination had only just begun. By the 10th cycle, the observation chamber was crowded. Word had spread through the Galactic Covenant that something strange was happening on Crucible 7. Examiners who had not watched a test in centuries came to see. Scientists who studied primitive species arrived with recording devices. Even members of the High Council sent representatives to observe. Velkith did not understand the attention at first. Then she looked at what the humans had built, and she began to understand. It was not a camp anymore. It was a village. The original shelter had grown into a row of small huts, each one better than the last. Maria Chun had learned for first design. The newer shelters had raised floors to keep out water and insects. They had woven walls that let air pass through, but blocked wind. They had roofs covered in layers of leaves that shed rain like the scales of a fish. But the buildings were not what amazed the observers. It was how the humans had organized everything else. There was an area for cooking, where Priya had built a stone oven that could hold heat for hours. There was an area for medical care, where Sarah treated injuries and kept a growing collection of plants that seemed to help with pain and sickness. There was an area for building and repair, where Lynn and Maria worked on tools and improvements. And there was a teaching area. Every evening, when the sun began to set, the humans gathered in a circle near the central fire. Thomas Wright, the teacher, led what they called the sharing hour. During this time, each person taught the others something they knew. "Why are they doing this?" a visiting scientist asked Velketh. "It seems wasteful. Time spent teaching could be spent gathering food." Velketh had been thinking about this same question. She watched as Sarah showed the others how to wrap a wound properly. Every human practiced on each other, learning the movements. "They are creating copies of themselves," Velketh said slowly. "If the doctor dies, someone else can wrap wounds. If the farmer dies, someone else knows which plants to eat. They are spreading knowledge like seeds." "Inefficient," the scientist said. "No, wise." The scientist made a sound of disagreement and moved away. But Velketh kept watching. She was beginning to see patterns she had never noticed in other species. On the surface, Yusuf was teaching David about soil. The young botanist had knowledge from books and laboratories, but Yusuf had knowledge from decades of working the earth with his hands. "You see how this dirt is dark?" Yusuf said, rubbing it between his fingers. "Dark soil is rich soil, good for growing. The light soil near the rocks is poor. Nothing grows well there. How do you know this without testing equipment?" Yusuf smiled. "My grandfather taught me, and his grandfather taught him. Some things you learn not from machines, but from people who came before you." David wrote notes in the dirt with a stick. He had no paper, but he had a good memory. Later, he would share these notes with others. Nearby, Marcus was working with Robert and Chen Wei on a different project. They had found a creature in the forest, a small animal with 6 legs and soft fur. It was not dangerous. It ate plants and moved slowly. Most importantly, it seemed to like being near the humans. "If we can tame it," Marcus said, "maybe there are others. Maybe we can use them for something." "Use them how?" Robert asked. "I do not know yet. But having another creature trust us, that means something. It means we are part of this place now, not just visitors." They built a small pen from woven branches. The creature did not try to escape. It seemed happy to have food brought to it. Chen Wei named it Lucky, and soon all the humans were talking to it like a pet. In the observation chamber, this caused great confusion. "They are wasting resources on a useless animal," Ka said. "The food they give it could feed them instead." "Watch," Velketh said. "Watch what happens." What happened was unexpected. The humans began to smile more. They visited Lucky when they were sad or tired. The creature seemed to bring them comfort, a small piece of softness in a hard world. Their mood improved. Their work became better. Their cooperation grew stronger. "They are not wasting resources," Velketh said slowly. "They are maintaining something inside themselves. The animal helps them feel connected." She did not have the right word in her language. Humans had a word for it. They called it hope. By the 5th dance cycle, the humans had established routines. Morning was for gathering food and water. Afternoon was for building and improving the village. Evening was for teaching and planning. Night was for rest and watching. They had discovered 3 more plants that were safe to eat. They had learned which areas of the forest held predators and which were safe. They had built tools from stone and wood, simple things that made work easier. But more than that, they had built trust. Velketh watched as Elena argued with James about the best way to store food. Their voices were loud. Their hands moved sharply. It looked like a fight. Conflict, Koth noted. This is where they will begin to break apart. But then something strange happened. The argument ended. Elena and James talked more quietly. They found a middle way between their ideas. Then they shook hands and went back to work. They fight, Velkith said, but they do not break. They use the fighting to make better decisions. Then they stop fighting and stay together. How is that possible? I do not know, but it is remarkable. The examination was halfway complete. 20 cycles remained. All 12 humans were still alive. They had food, water, shelter, tools, and a growing understanding of their new world. In the observation chamber, the mood had changed. The early bets on quick human failure had been forgotten. Now the examiners watched with something close to respect. Velkith reviewed her notes. She had watched 107 species take this examination. She had seen strength and weakness, courage and cowardice, wisdom and foolishness. But she had never seen anything quite like this. The humans were not surviving despite their weaknesses. They were surviving because of their strengths that the Sithrani had not thought to measure. They could not run fast, but they could run far. They could not see in the dark, but they could make light. They could not survive alone, but together they were becoming something greater than 12 individuals. Examiner Velkith, Koth said, interrupting her thoughts. There is movement in the forest. The large predator, the one called the Gravemaker. Velkith looked at the screen. A dark shape moved between the trees, far from the human village, but moving closer. It had 6 legs and jaws that could crush stone. It had killed candidates from 11 previous examinations. How long until it finds them? At its current pace, perhaps 10 cycles. Perhaps less if it catches their scent. Velkith nodded slowly. This was the true test. The humans had built something remarkable, but could they defend it? Could they face a predator that had killed beings far stronger than them? She would soon find out. On the surface below, the humans continued their work, unaware of the danger moving slowly toward them through the alien forest. They laughed and argued and taught and built. They pet their small animal and told stories by the fire. They planned for a future they could not guarantee. It was the most human thing they could do. And somewhere in the darkness, the Gravemaker moved closer, drawn by the smell of smoke and the sound of voices, hungry for prey that did not yet know it was being hunted. Marcus found the first footprint on the morning of the 28th cycle. He was walking the perimeter of the village, as he did every morning, checking for signs of danger. The print was pressed deep into the mud near the river. It was as large as his entire torso. 6 toes, each ending in a claw mark that cut into the earth like a knife. He did not need to measure it or study it. He knew what it meant. Something big was watching them. He called the others together. They stood in a circle, looking at the drawing he had made in the dirt. I do not know what it is, Marcus said, but it is large. Very large. And it has been circling our village for at least 2 days. I found older prints to the east. How do you know it is circling? Elena asked. The prints curve around us. It is not passing through. It is watching, learning. The group was silent. They had seen smaller predators in the forest, quick creatures with sharp teeth that hunted in packs. Those they had scared away with fire and noise. But this was different. This was something that did not fear them. What do we do? David asked. His voice was thin with fear. YUSUF. The old farmer spoke first. We have 2 choices. We can run. Or we can fight. Run where? Maria said. We do not know this world. We do not know if there is any place safer than here. Then we fight, Marcus said. We prepare. We make this place as hard to attack as possible. And when it comes, we are ready. In the observation chamber, Velkith watched with great interest. She had seen this moment many times. The moment when prey realizes it is being hunted. Most species fell apart here. Fear took hold and broke them into pieces. But the humans did not fall apart. They are planning, Koth said with surprise. Yes, they are treating the predator as a problem to be solved. Over the next 4 cycles, the humans transformed their village. Marcus directed the work with the eye of a soldier. But every decision was discussed, debated, and agreed upon by the group. They dug trenches around the outer edge of the village, deep enough that a creature would stumble and slow down. They filled the bottom of the trenches with sharpened stakes, points facing upward. They built walls of woven branches between the trees, creating barriers that would force any attacker to follow paths the humans had chosen. They made weapons. James, the writer, had never held a weapon in his life, but he learned to sharpen a wooden spear until the point could pierce bark. Lynn built triplines from woven plant fiber, strings that would snap and make noise if anything touched them. Elena found stones that could be thrown hard enough to hurt. Most importantly, they made a plan. We cannot kill it with spears, Marcus said. But we do not have to kill it. We just have to make attacking us too painful, too difficult, too exhausting. We have to make it decide we are not worth the trouble. And if it does not decide that, Robert asked, then we keep fighting until it does. Or until one of us wins. They assign positions. They practice running from one defensive point to another. They learned signals, sounds they could make to warn each other without words. Every person knew their role. Every person knew where to go if the attack came. The creature came on the 30-second cycle dot. It was near sunset when Lucky, the small pet creature, began to make frightened sounds. The humans had learned to trust its instincts. It could hear and smell things they could not. Everyone to positions, Marcus called out. They moved quickly, each person going to their assigned spot. Priya and David, the least experienced fighters, went to the center of the village where they could tend the fire and care for anyone who was hurt. The others spread out along the defensive lines. The forest went quiet. Birds stopped singing. Insects stopped buzzing. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. Then it appeared. The Gravemaker stepped out of the trees like a nightmare given form. It was massive, larger than any creature the humans had seen. 6 legs moved with terrible grace. Its head was broad and flat, with jaws that could bite a person in half. Its eyes were small and dark, fixed on the village with hungry attention. "Hold," Marcus said softly. "Let it come to us." The creature moved forward slowly. It was testing them, watching for weakness. It had hunted many things on this world. It knew how prey behaved, but the humans did not behave like prey. They stood firm. They made noise, banging wooden tools against trees and shouting with voices full of anger instead of fear. Fire burned bright behind them. The creature hesitated, thought it was not used to prey that did not run, then it charged. What happened next was chaos, and terror and violence. But it was also something else. It was 12 people fighting together, moving together, thinking together. The creature hit the first trench and stumbled. Stakes bit into its legs. It roared with pain and anger and pulled itself forward. Robert threw a stone that struck its eye. It turned toward him, and Chun-Wei stabbed its side with a spear. It turned toward her, and Maria jabbed at it from another direction. They were bees stinging a bear. Each wound was small, but there were many wounds, and they kept coming. Marcus led from the front. He was the most experienced, the most brave. He drew the creature's attention again and again, letting others strike from behind. Then the creature caught him. One massive leg swept out and struck Marcus across the chest. He flew backward and hit a tree. His left arm, bent in a way arms should not bend. The bone was broken, shattered below the elbow. Sarah was at his side in moments. "We have to get you back." "No." Marcus's voice was tight with pain, but his eyes were clear. "I can still fight." "Tie it off." "Tie it tight." Sarah pulled the belt from Marcus's waist and wrapped it around his arm above the break. She pulled it so tight that Marcus groaned, but the bleeding slowed, and Marcus stood up. In the observation chamber, Velketh made a sound she had never made before. It was a sound of shock. "He is still fighting," she said. "His arm is destroyed and he is still fighting." The battle continued. The creature was bleeding from a dozen wounds now. It was tiring. The humans were tiring too, but they did not stop. They rotated positions, fresh fighters moving forward while exhausted fighters fell back. Yusuf was 73 years old. He had lived a long life. He had seen his children grow up and have children of their own. When the creature charged toward the center of the village, toward Priya and David, he did not move out of the way. He stood in its path with a sharpened stake in his hands. "Yusuf, no!" Sarah screamed. The old farmer set his feet and braced the stake against the ground. The creature's own charge drove the weapon deep into its chest. Jaws closed around Yusuf, and he was gone. But the creature fell. It crashed to the ground, the stake buried in its heart. Its legs kicked weakly. Its eyes lost their focus. And then it was still. The humans gathered around Yusuf's body. What remained of it? No one spoke. No one could speak. They had won. But they had lost something too. Elena was the first to break the silence. She was crying, tears running down her dirty face. "He saved us. He knew what would happen, and he saved us." They buried Yusuf where he fell, in the center of the village he had helped build. They had no priest, so Thomas said words he remembered from funerals on Earth. They had no flowers, so they placed stones around the grave. Then James began to sing. It was a song from Earth, old and sad and beautiful. One by one, the others joined him. They did not all know the words, but they knew the feeling. They sang for Yusuf. They sang for themselves. They sang because singing was what humans did when words were not enough. In the observation chamber, no one moved. Velketh watched the screen with eyes that would not blink. She saw the humans standing around the grave, singing in the darkness, covered in blood and dirt and grief. "They are mourning," Koss said quietly, "but they killed the gravemaker. No species has ever done that." "They did more than kill it," Velketh said. "They sacrificed one of their own to protect the group. And now they honor that sacrifice. They grieve and they continue." Both things at the same time. She had watched 107 species take the examination. She had never seen anything like this. Below, the humans finished their song. Then they went back to work. There was a village to repair. There were wounded to tend. There were 8 more cycles to survive. Yusuf was gone. But what he had helped build remained. And the humans would not let it fall. On the morning of the 40th cycle, the extraction team arrived. They materialized at the edge of the forest in a flash of blue light. 5 Sithrani technicians in silver suits, carrying equipment to transport the survivors back to the Covenant station. They expected to find bodies. They expected to find ruins. They expected to find, at most, 2 or 3 broken survivors barely clinging to life. They found a village. The lead technician stopped and stared. Behind him, his team did the same. None of them had ever seen anything like this. The village was organized and clean. Paths of flat stones connected the buildings. A garden grew near the river, with rows of alien plants that had been carefully tended. Smoke rose from a cooking fire where something that smelled like food was being prepared. A small pen held several of the native creatures, all of them calm and well-fed. And standing in the center of it all were 9 humans. They looked tired. They looked thin. They wore clothes that had been patched and mended many times. One of them, a large man with gray at his temples, had an arm that ended in a bandaged stump below the elbow. But they stood straight. They stood together. And they were smiling. Marcus Jackson stepped forward. He had lost his arm, but not his strength. Not his spirit. He walked toward the extraction team with the steady pace of a man who had nothing to prove. "Good morning," he said. "You must be our ride home." The lead technician did not know how to respond. His translator device converted the human words into his own language, but the meaning seemed impossible. This man had just survived 40 cycles on one of the deadliest examination worlds in the Covenant system. His arm had been torn off by a predator, and he was greeting them as if they were guests arriving for a meal. "I am Technician Vrolkoth," the Sithrani finally said. "I am here to transport you to the Covenant station for final evaluation." "We know," Marcus said. "We have been expecting you. Please, come see what we have built." The tour was brief but impressive. The technicians saw the shelters, each one built with care and skill. They saw the food storage, where dried plants and preserved meat were kept safe from insects and rot. They saw the water system, simple clay pots that filtered river water until it was clean enough to drink. They saw the medical area, where Sarah had organized her collected medicines into neat rows. They saw Yusuf's grave, marked with a circle of stones and a small wooden sign. "He saved us," Sarah said simply. "We wanted to make sure no one forgets." In the observation chamber above the planet, Velkith watched the extraction team's progress. Her chamber was crowded with observers from across the Covenant. Everyone wanted to see the humans who had done the impossible. 9 survivors out of 12, Koth reported. 3 deaths. Yusuf Hamid, killed fighting the Gravemaker. Also Patricia Wells and Michael Torres, who died from injuries and illness in the first 20 cycles. A 75% survival rate, Velkith said. The highest in 200 examinations. Yes, Examiner. And they did not merely survive. They built infrastructure. They created sustainable food sources. They domesticated local fauna. They developed medical treatments from local plants. Velkith nodded slowly. She had already written most of her report. But there was one more thing she needed to do. The transport beam activated, and Velkith materialized in the human village. She was wearing her ceremonial robes, the ones that marked her as a senior examiner of the Galactic Covenant. The humans gathered around her with curious eyes. "I am Examiner Velkith," she said. "I have observed your examination from the beginning. I have watched everything you have done." "Everything?" James asked. He was the writer, the one who had sung over Yusuf's grave. "Even the parts where we argued about whose turn it was to clean the latrine?" "Yes, even those parts." Some of the humans laughed. It was a strange sound to Velkith's ears. They had been through terror and death and loss. They should not be able to laugh. But they did it anyway. "You have questions," Marcus said. It was not a question. "I do," Velkith admitted. "Many questions. My species has conducted this examination for 1,000,000 years. We have tested 10,000 species. We have seen strength and speed and intelligence beyond what your species possesses. But we have never seen what you did. What did we do?" Velkith considered her words carefully. "You did not just survive. You thrived. You did not just endure. You built. You lost 3 of your people, and you grieved for them, but you did not break. You kept going. Why? How?" The humans looked at each other. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Thomas, the teacher, stepped forward. "May I tell you a story?" he asked. Velkith nodded. "On our world, long ago, our ancestors were weak. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor. They could not run fast. They could not climb well. By all logic, they should have died. But they did not die. Do you know why? Tell me. Because they had each other. They hunted together. They built shelters together. They raised children together. They shared food and shared knowledge and shared hope. When one was weak, others were strong. When one fell, others lifted them up. They were not the fastest or the strongest, but together they were something more. Thomas paused. His eyes were bright with something Velketh could not name. We are not a species of individuals, he said. We are a species of groups, of families and tribes and communities. When you put us alone, we struggle. But when you put us together, we become something greater than the sum of our parts. That is what we did here. That is what we have always done. That is what makes us human. Velketh was silent for a long moment. Around her, the other examiners watched from their viewing screens, waiting for her verdict. I have made my decision, she finally said. Humanity has passed the examination. You will be granted membership in the Galactic Covenant. The humans did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They simply nodded, as if they had expected nothing less. Marcus stepped forward and extended his remaining hand. Pleasure to meet you properly, he said. We have some questions about membership terms whenever you are ready. Velketh looked at the offered hand. In Sithrani culture, touching strangers was considered strange and uncomfortable. But she reached out and took his hand anyway. Welcome to the Covenant, she said. 1 month later, Velketh's report was published across the Galactic Covenant. It became required reading at every academy and training facility. The relevant section was quoted in speeches and debates for decades to come. It read, humans do not endure hardship. They transform it. They take suffering and convert it into cooperation. They take loss and convert it into resolve. They take isolation and convert it into community. When we designed the examination, we designed it to find a species breaking point. We believed that every species had one. We believed that under enough pressure, any group would shatter into selfish individuals fighting for their own survival. We were wrong. Humans do not appear to have a breaking point. When we pushed them, they pushed back. When we hurt them, they healed each other. When we killed their weakest member, he chose to die protecting the group instead of himself. They adapt. They bond. They hope without reason and fight without guarantee. They grieve and they continue. Both things at the same time. This examiner recommends immediate acceptance into the Covenant. Not because humans passed the examination, but because the examination was never designed for something like them. They are not the strongest species. They are not the fastest. They are not the smartest. But they are something else. Something we do not have a word for. They are human. And that, I believe, is enough. Far below, on a blue and green world called Earth, 7 billion humans continued their lives. They built and argued and loved and fought. They raised children and buried the dead. They hoped for the future and learned from the past. They did not know that the galaxy was watching. They did not know that they had been tested and found worthy. They did not know that somewhere in the darkness between stars, ancient beings were learning to respect them. They only knew what they had always known. That life was hard. That the universe was vast. And that together, they could face anything. It was the most human thing they could do. And it was exactly enough.